Well, hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to show you something really quickly here, a little trick that I like to use if specifically I'm trying to get my bass guitar to not only stand out in a really dense mix, like say it's a rock mix or like a CCM worship music mix, something where there's a lot of band elements happening, maybe a lot of synth, a lot of low-end stuff and production elements that can sometimes compete with the bass guitar. I want to show you a little trick that I use not only to make the low end feel massive and smooth, on a mix, but also that helps it feel really wide, and it kind of just does this trick where it just makes it feel like the low mids in your mix are just kind of exploding outward and wide. So I'm going to share my screen with you here, and what I want to show you is this little effects bus that I've created. Mind you, this can look differently for every person. This is not just a one-size-fits-all thing, but this is the way that I like to use it. And in this particular mix, what I'm doing here is I've got my bass guitar channel here, and I'm just sending a bus send or an aux send, depending on what DAW you're using, and it's pre-fader. So basically, what that means, if you're unfamiliar with that, is it's just sending it. It's just basically sending a direct copy, and my actual fader here, my volume fader, doesn't have any control over what's being sent to that bus. So basically, we're just getting a direct copy of this audio track sent to this bus here that I've labeled Bass FX. And so I'm doing something interesting here. You can see I've already got my processing happening on the main bass channel. Also shout out to David Funk, who played bass on this song. He's an amazing bass player. So honestly, the tone of what he recorded is just incredible already. That's a great place to start. So I'm not necessarily trying to change or manipulate the tone of the bass or what he's playing as much as I'm really trying to just kind of shape it specifically for this song and make it stand out in the midst of all the other elements that are happening in the mix. And then beyond that, what I'm showing you here with this little bass effects trick is I'm actually going to use the bass guitar to create some interesting stuff, some interesting width happening in the low mids that actually I think is going to complement the electric guitars in the mix really well. So let me show you what I'm doing here. I'll hit play real quick. Yeah, so as you can hear, it's a really dense mix. There's a lot of things happening, a lot of cool production elements going on. But what I've got set up here, I'll just show you quickly my main bass channel. I've got this Lindell channel strip, basically just like a Neve channel strip. And I've got like a fast compressor going with the smash knob in with like a parallel blend. So basically just kind of a fast, really kind of hardcore compressor that's happening that just kind of keeps things, keeps things feeling big and without making it feel like it's pumping. It's really smooth, but it also just makes it feel really present. I'm not going to talk a ton about that in this video, but just kind of showing you what I've got going on here. And then I've got a really slow, usually I use this on my bus compressor as my bus compressor, but I'm sending a side chain of the kick, actually the kick trigger, to this specific plugin. So every time the kick hits, I'll show you here. You see we've got about 3 dB of gain reduction happening, and all that's doing is just making it feel really tight that every time the kick drum punches, it's gonna duck our bass down just a little bit and just make it feel like those two things are just kind of glued together. And then I've got this guy. This is just a little kind of magic trick plugin from Plugin Alliance. This preset called Super Fat Bass. You have to kind of dial it in because sometimes it's a lot, but it just adds a lot of low subby information to the bass and just really helps kind of extend the low end in a really cool way. And then I've got this Kirchhoff EQ, very similar to like Fab Filter or another, like graphical EQ with an analyzer. And actually all I'm doing is rolling off some of the low end, which you might think, well, why are you adding sub information and then rolling some of the sub information off? I want the smooth, extended low end, but I still want to control it to where it's not really competing with my kick drum, but more so just kind of sitting like layered on top of the kick drum. If this is the kick drum every time it hits, I want my bass in this song to kind of feel like it's like right there in the frequency spectrum, but still feel warm and, you know, fat. And then just got a little bit of, you know, reduction here, 1.3 dB around 300. It's just kind of shaping it, just getting a little bit of, you know, that muddy frequency out. But so that's my main bass channel, and I'm just going to show you what that sounds like by itself soloed. So again, the bass tone is already really awesome on this. I'm not trying to just like manipulate or change the bass tone dramatically. I believe that when David records, he's got some guitar pedals and stuff that he's running through. So you notice it's quite overdriven. But I really love that because the overdriven bass sound is going to help it really sit in the mix really nice. Whenever I unmute, you know, if I unmute everything here or unsolo the bass channel, you'll notice like it just sits really well in the mix, but it doesn't sound overly distorted. It's going to sound more distorted when you solo it than it actually feels in the mix. So here's the mix again. See, so at least in my opinion, whenever it's in the context of the mix, it doesn't sound overly distorted. I think it sits really nice, but it just kind of helps it carve out a cool little sweet spot for it there. But so this little trick, this effects and we've got going on here, this bass effects, I want to show you what I'm doing here. It's really simple. Basically, I've just got this chorus. Again, this is just a Plugin Alliance chorus. You can use any chorus. It doesn't have to be this specific one. And what that sounds like is this. It just makes it sound really wide, almost like a sub bass or like a synth bass kind of thing, where, you know, usually you're used to hearing the bass guitar kind of like dead center and it's just playing the part of the low end glue, if you will, in the mix. Throwing it into this chorus, I'm not necessarily trying to make it sound overly like, you know, like, oh, there's a chorus on the bass. Like think of like, you know, The Police or something like that. Like, you know, a song where it's like a very prominent chorusy bass part. I'm not so much trying to do that. What I'm really trying to do is create a sense of width. So when every time the bass is played, you've got this center bass channel that's our, like, you know, our main bass guitar signal. But then this aux or this bus that we've got here, this send channel, it's automatically just this real wide sound to it. But then I've got some shaping happening here in the EQ. Notice I've got actually all of the subby, all of the low end information. I've got that completely filtered out. And that's intentional. And basically what I'm doing here, I've got quite a bit of compression happening, but you'll notice I've got this low mid knob. It's not cranked, but it's definitely turned up, and it's living right around. Again, this is going to be different in every mix. So I'm not saying don't take these exact settings and, you know, copy it to your mix and think it's going to sound exactly the same. It's all in the context of the song and the production. But yeah, for me in this song, I've got it right here around the 600 hertz frequency range. And what I find it's doing, we've got the width coming from the stereo chorus, but we've also got that's another thing I should probably add, is that when we send it to the aux, even though it's a mono recording of the bass, it's becoming stereo in the aux, and that's why when we put the chorus plug-in on it, it automatically just gets really wide, right? But then what we're doing with this EQ is we're just shaping it up. We're just taking a lot of that low-end information out, and then we're going to boost some of the low mids here. We're going to compress it so it's real nice and smooth. So I'll bypass this guy real quick. So there's all that low end back that you'll hear. And when I bring it back, notice how it, by itself, it kind of sounds a little, you know, a little too mid forward, a little honky, and kind of, you know, doesn't really sound like your normal bass sound that you're used to hearing. But that's actually intentional, because remember we're layering it with this main bass channel. So the two together sound like this. So here's our main bass, our bass effects. Now just our bass effects. And then what we can do is we can just blend these two together in the mix to where it feels nice. So I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna bring everything else back in. I'm just gonna push this fader up. And again, it's subtle. If you're not listening in headphones, you might not be able to hear it. But if you'll notice what it's doing is it's just kind of extending out and making the mix feel really wide in that low mid range. And what I like about it is I feel like when we do this trick, if you've got the electric guitars, imagine your electric guitars are kind of sitting here in this frequency range, and then you've got your kick drum down here, right here in the middle between like the lowest frequencies of the electric guitar and then kind of above, sitting on top of the kick drum. You've got this really nice warm pocket of low mid information that just feels really wide and really nice. And I like it. I think it's a cool little trick, and basically it's just going to help make the mix feel larger than life. It's going to make it feel really wide. But then also, you know, just kind of stacking our kick drum, our bass, and then our electric guitar. So this whole frequency spectrum just feels really nice and wide. So I'm going to push this up. Again, it's a subtle trick. I'm not saying that it's, you know, this crazy overt thing that maybe, I don't even know if you can hear it unless you're listening on headphones. But what I've noticed is it's maybe more of a felt thing than like, you know, something that people are going to notice in the mix so much. But that's kind of the point. Obviously, you could get really creative with it and you could be kind of extreme with it if you wanted to. I like to use it more so just to make the mix feel larger than life and feel wide in that low mid range. So let me know in the comments what you think about that, if that makes sense. Hopefully I explained it well. And yeah, let me know how you're using that, or what you know, there's no rules. You could put a chorus on there. You could also put a phaser or a stereo widening plugin, something that's going to create that effect, that wide affected sound. But let me know how you're using it, if it makes sense. Yeah, and I'll see you in the next video.